Renaissance artist. Renaissance art portrayed more secular subjects in comparison to previous artistic movements. Artists strayed away from Byzantine religious paintings to a more realistic approach in their illustration of civilization. The frontrunners of this idea were artists such as Giotto and Cimabue. So prolific at that time, the term perfect artist was coined, titling artists such as Andrew Montagne and Paolo Uccello. In addition to subject matter, early Renaissance artists expressed their interest in mythological subject matter. For example, Botticello's Birth of Venus is seen as one of the earliest paintings of a mythological scene. His painting would lead the way for others in his or her pursuit of expression. Perspective. Renaissance artists focused on not just developing new techniques and methods, but also their perspective and architectural form. Their intent was to render the real world as closely as possible in their art. Architect Filippo Brunelleschi first successfully implemented the usage of linear perspective, a mathematical system which creates the illusion of space and distance on a flat distance, to create an appearance of a 3D space. This is done by seeing the subject as if it was through an open window, drawing a line to represent the horizon, dividing the painting with alternating horizontal lines, and fixating a vanishing point, which is usually located towards the center. Then visual rays draw the viewer's eyes to a point in the distance and helps the viewer pinpoint the perspective points of the piece. You can see it in this picture here by Brunelleschi. Classicism is the reiteration of classical themes in imagery in art, literature, and architecture. There was a rebirth of classicism during the Italian Renaissance because of the rediscovery of ancient Latin and Greek texts. The reiteration of mythological ideas during the Renaissance were prevalent, and this is the Birth of Venus by Botticelli, and it's cool. Individualism. So individualism is the idea that the potential of humans is greater than previously thought. As the Renaissance evolved, artists and philosophers inspired the common man for what the individual should strive to be. Many people invested their time to the arts and humanities to better themselves. This is a random picture I found. It's pretty cool. Geometrical arrangement. Figures in the Renaissance art were depicted with the idea of a geometric shape behind them, and famously Leonardo da Vinci made artworks such as The Last Supper and this one, with the idea of rhombuses and triangles in mind. Lights and shadows. So this quote: hence, I would remind you, O painter, to dress your figures in the lightest colors you can find, since if you can put them in dark colors, they will be too slight relief and inconspicuous in distance. The reason that the shadows of all objects are dark. And if you make a dress dark, there is little variety in the lights and shadows, while in the light colors there are many grades. It shows the importance of lights and shadows in Renaissance art. So light was a tool used by artists to define their subjects and bring out a sense of realism in their works through the exploration of contrast between light and dark. This technique of contrasting light and dark, chiaroscuro, revealed the skill of artists during the Renaissance. So, artists as celebrities. During the Middle Ages, the artist was considered a craftsman, and he worked in large teams and focused on skill rather than creativity. And his works of art were commissions rather than an expression of what he really thought in mind. However, during the Renaissance, artists studied all subject matters from mathematics, anatomy, geometry to classical culture, philosophy, and theology, and thus they began to realize their self-worth in society. And this is where the term liberal arts comes from, as it's not just a trade but a lifestyle. So there was a more appreciation for the artistic creativity from artists, and now artists were seen as the greatest of intellectuals, and their art reflected their understanding of society through their interpretations. And so we go to Paolo Uccello. So he was born in 1397 in Prato Vecchio. He served as a bridge for the late Gothic style and the new style of the early Renaissance. He was an aspiring apprentice under Lorenzo Ghiberti, where he worked on the bronze doors for the baptistry of the Florence Cathedral, consisting of 28 panels depicting the New Testament's scenes of the life of Christ. This is his first painting, The Annunciation by Uccello. It was made in 1420-ish. Uccello joined a fraternity of painters under the name of Compagnia de San Luca, and later became a member of the Arte dei Medici e degli Speziali, the official guild of Florence. For the years of 1425 to 1431, Uccello worked as a masterful mosaicist in Venice. However, his work in Venice has all been but lost. It suggests that he visited Rome with his friend Donatello before returning to Florence in 1431, remaining there for the rest of his life. to work on his works such as Duomo. From the 1430s to 1450s, he painted most of his famous paintings, most notably the Battle of San Romano and Florence. So this is the Battle of San Romano. You can see how he used the one-point perspective leading this way in the background, and also his usage of light and dark colors to highlight the battlefield and the shadows here. It's pretty cool. Further, you can see how he used the shadows to depict the soldiers right here, instead of just being one blob. And I like this picture because of the horse. Very cool. In 1453, Uccello married Tommaso Malefici, naming his child Donato after Donatello. 3 years later, his wife gave birth to Antonia, who grew up to be a Carmelite nun. Giorgio Vasari called his daughter someone who knew how to draw and was even listed as a painter on her death certificate. However, she remains a mystery as her work is non-existent. In the periods of 1465 to 1469, Uccello worked with his son Donato and Urbino for the Confraternity of Corpus Dominum, a brotherhood of laymen. Most of his time here was spent working on the Paideia for the miracle of the profaned host. His Paideia consists of 6 scenes of the anti-Semitic myth of the host of desecration that supposedly occurred in Paris 1290. It has been suggested that the subject of the main panel, on which the Duke of Frederick of Montefeltro of Urbino appears in the background conversing with an Asian, is related to the anti-Semitic intention of the Paideia. However, Federico did allow a small Jewish community to live in Urbino at the time, and not all of the scenes are unanimously attributed to Paolo Uccello. In his Florence tax return in August 1469, Uccello declared that he finds himself old and ailing, my wife is ill, and I can no longer work. So in his final moments, Paolo was forgone and lonely, and he was afraid of the hardship he had fought during his lifetime. His final piece is The Hunt. In 1470, he wrote his testament on 11 November 1475 and died a month later on the 10th of December 1475 at the age of 78. He was laid rest in his father's tomb at the church of Santo Spirito. Uccello is renowned for his introspective take on perspective, most notably in The Flood, which is this picture, I believe. The Nativity and the Battle of San Romano. His meticulous and analytical thought process allowed Uccello to depict objects in a three-dimensional space. And Paolo's rigor is similar to the rigor of Cubists in the early 20th century, whose images were more like lifelike and true, when they were less true to life, if that makes sense. Paolo constructs space through perspective and historic events through the structure of the space. And so, if the resulting image is unnatural and realistic, so much worse for nature and history. Quote unquote, G.C. Argan, talking about how Paolo was a smurf at drawing. And this is the Nativity, yeah. And this is his final piece, The Hunt.